Hello and welcome to this virtual roundtable series from Foodservice Consultant Society International, FCSI, focusing on ventless cooking innovation. I'm Michael Jones, I'm the Editorial Director for Progressive Content and FCSI's Foodservice Consultant magazine. This roundtable series is kindly supported by the Middleby Corporation, and this episode specifically will explore how ventless technology can help senior living facility operators free up otherwise non-traditional or dead spaces in its food service settings, but also it will examine how design consultants can harness the potential of the technology for their clients' benefit. I'm very happy to be joined today by our expert panelists, two leading FCSI member consultants in Connie Dickson, FCSI of Rippe Associates, and FCSI Associate Andrey Teleguz of SCOPOS, plus Scott Heim of Middleby. I will now ask each of them to introduce themselves in turn, but also to tell us a little bit about their business and their area of expertise. Connie, ladies first, can we start with you, please?
Thank you, Mike. I'm Connie Dickson. I'm a principal with Rippe Associates. We're based in Minneapolis, and we're food service consultants. We work in all different sectors, but I specifically focus on healthcare, senior living, and B&I situations.
Fantastic. Thank you, Connie. And Andrey?
Andrey Teleguz. I'm principal of SCOPOS Hospitality Group. We are based out of Ephrata, Pennsylvania. And likewise, we do pretty much all sectors, specializing in senior living, healthcare, corporate dining, some specialty projects, and things like that, working nationally and North America, more or less.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrey. And finally, Scott, please.
Yes, I'm Scott Heim. I'm the president of Middleby's Ventless Cooking Solutions. And what I'm really focusing on right now is looking at new products, new ideas that can take ventless into those non-traditional sites and help resolve some of the huge ventilation issues that restrict designs for kitchens and different setups for culinary backgrounds.
Scott, can we stay with you for a moment then? And can you please give us an overview of the relevancy of ventless technology for senior living food service projects specifically? Why is this technology a good fit for this sector?
Sure. If you look at the whole senior living, there are roughly about 30,000 centers across the United States, and I'll focus primarily on the U.S. And then you also have long-term care facilities, and they're roughly about 16 to 17,000 sites. But even before the whole COVID crisis, the health crisis, we know the aging demographics are going to result in more and more emphasis placed on senior living. And for senior living, a lot of the decisions are being based on, I want to go to that particular location because I really find the social aspects and the meal aspects, the culinary part of the whole program, attractive. So we knew senior living was going to be a big deal. And for ventless, especially now with the whole health crisis, there's got to be ways to spread out the guests to actually help with that food preparation. But at the same time, you don't want to hide all the cooking in the back of the kitchen. The meal preparation, the whole meal environment is really a key part of that senior living experience. So we believe that there are options, there are design elements that could be very attractive for the senior living facilities across the U.S.
Scott, staying with you for a moment, what do you think sort of historically have been the challenges or maybe the obstacles that have so far prevented any operators from installing ventless in their facilities? Is there simply more of an education piece to be done here?
It's an education piece, and it's also trying to dispel some of the myths, some of the lingering skepticism about ventless. Up until recently, there were all kinds of issues, especially for the facility engineers, thinking you guys can never get the ventless portfolio into our facility and get the approvals from the boards of health. Maybe there's going to be an issue with the local fire department. So it really was all about compliance and approvals. And that, I think, inhibited a lot of the design elements. But that's changing dramatically because of the FCSI community. And we've got the two experts right here that are looking for innovative, unique, and interesting solutions.
And Connie, as a consultant with a huge amount of experience in both healthcare, but also senior living projects specifically, but one who has not so far overseen, from what I understand, any ventless specification or installation, can you explain how sort of on your radar the technology has been, but also whether or not you think it might be a good fit in the future for some of your projects?
Absolutely. We certainly have used ventless equipment in very targeted applications. We've used in situations where we've got limited exhaust hood capacity or no hood at all, we've used things like ventless combi ovens and ventless accelerated ovens, quick cooking, conveyor ovens. We also have used some of that ventless equipment just to give an operator an opportunity to expand their menu options with some additional quick production items. But absolutely, senior living in the time that I've worked in that market has gone from probably what was more of a healthcare model to more of a hospitality model. And that's driven by the change in the demographics. We've gone from, in the US, what would have been the greatest generation to the baby boomers, and they have totally different expectations around food. It's not enough to give them a dining hall or a dining room. They need everything from fine dining to fast casual to a coffee shop to a bar. And those all have different food needs, and that equipment and exhaust hood aren't necessarily going to be in use in all of those places. So Ventless offers a huge amount of opportunity there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Connie. Andrey, you've worked with the technology on your senior living projects before. From your perspective, how much of a sort of game changer has that technology been for the sector specifically? Has it also, how has it been a sort of point of difference or solved a particular problem that you've experienced previously?
For us, it has a big game changer because obviously, like Connie mentioned already, due to limitations of venting capability, maybe we're doing putting a cafe or a bistro, mini bistro in a space that has multiple stories above. Venting that becomes very costly, either that limitation or the cost of the investment. Maybe we're working with an operator and they have a certain X amount of investment. Having that limitation and going ventless allowed us to still make that concept feasible and applicable and create something. But the challenge we always face is most of the time, that ventless equipment is very bulky, ugly, and noisy, right? And not to pick on wells, but I use that wells on the back of the house, right? So somehow we need to work through those challenges. And we had approached actually Caliber one time, and we developed a jointly kind of worked with them and gave them our feedback and developed a ventless system that now close to over 100 units. We have spec'd these amazing induction self-contained units that have our griddle, saute, or woks, or whatever that is. And that has exploded for us. So that has been a huge, and operators love it.
Scott, how big is the potential for Ventless and the type of projects that Connie and Andrey are working on? And for you, giving us the manufacturer perspective, how has it solved challenges that you faced with working with consultants in the past?
I want to build right on what Connie talked about with the greatest generation and then the upcoming folks that are looking at these new facilities, whether it's Brookdale, Holiday Retirement. They're looking at these facilities. They see that there's an equation that these firms are spread out and they're growing across the U.S. But it's the local decision. It's that one particular facility. What's the social aspect? What's the environment? And as we said in the opening remarks, it's the culinary part. It's the dining part that's absolutely critical. And with Ventless and what Andrey was talking about is we don't want Ventless stuck in the back of the house. Ideally, it's an action station up in front. Yeah. You want that culinary staff engaging with the guests. That's part of their whole environment. And I look at the food itself. Why hide the star of the whole meal occasion, which is the sights, the sounds, some of the aromas that could be right there in the dining facility. And again, based on COVID and all the health issues, to actually see your meal being prepared in front of you or without any blockage to the sight lines, to the grills, to the combi ovens, to the fryers, to the turbo chef units, you're seeing the meal being cooked. It reinforces freshness and food safety.
Andrey, going back to you quickly, you mentioned in the past there was this sort of perception of kind of bulky, ugly, noisy. Why do you think there are still skeptics considering ventless cooking equipment? And really, what does this new equipment that's available, what does it offer operators?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly still new, and there's always hesitation from even starting working with the owner, with the facility. Hey, you're never going to get this approved. This is not going to happen, right? So it becomes that, like we talked, or Scott already mentioned, education process. We've got to educate our client. And then unfortunately, we've got to start that education process all over again with the code reviewers and inspectors. Yeah. And push that through. I think the operators already understand it and they want it and they understand the value of it. I think the other biggest value that it brings is, when we bring that experience that Scott just talked about front of the house with saute station or cooking and the smells and aroma, that actually frees up the space in the back kitchen, right? So now my back kitchen now can become bulk production. And essentially, I'm adding capability for the operator. So now the operator has a bigger capacity to put out more meals and better experience and better quality.
Connie, from your experience, how open is the industry in terms of senior living operators specifically? How open are they to this new technology compared to, say, other sectors?
I would say in any sector, this one is no exception. Operators are always looking for ways to solve the limitations, to keep their food program fresh, to give their customers more than they expected. So, the folks in senior living, we've talked about the demographics are changing. In the days of the Food Network, everybody loves food. It's theater. It's bringing that cooking activity out front is huge. I would agree with Andrey. It also needs to look good. And I think for operators, it's also important for them to think about the right application. Where does that ventless cooking equipment excel? What can it handle? You probably are not going to use it for heavy loads, but as Andrey said, that stuff happens in the back of the house and those prepped ingredients come out and now you're able to customize and cook in front of your customer and finish that item and give them the show as well as the confidence that it's fresh.
Andrey, how efficient is Ventless in your opinion? And can it help meet the challenge of a lack of skilled labor in the food service sector?
Well, I think it depends on type of the ventless technology, right? If we're talking combi ovens, certainly they're pre-programmed, and now most of the combi manufacturers are providing ventless options to go with them. So technically, that's a ventless technology. And having pre-programmed menu items, we can just have those pictures, right, and push those buttons. That's huge, and that's really applicable in senior living, and we use that tremendously, especially with the decentralized dining venues. So we can go to different neighborhoods and have everything pre-programmed, and I'm pushing that button, and I can produce that chicken or that steak at the same quality and level consistently, right? I think as far as induction technology, that still requires skill. You're still cooking on a vessel. It may perhaps be more safer, right? From a heat perspective, it's not like compared to a gas range. So it depends, I think, on the type of technology.
Scott, Andrey mentioned combi ovens there. What other technology or features could be applied to ventless cooking in senior living projects? Combi ovens, fryers, griddles, etc. And also, what factors are driving the expansion of those areas?
It goes back actually to what Connie was just saying. It's not just for senior living, but the ventless applications have been expanding dramatically. Whether it's frying, the combi ovens that Andrey mentioned, the griddles themselves, anything that you would need to accommodate a menu or accommodate a menu plan, you can now do with ventless. There really are no restrictions. So it's evolved, and there are new innovations that are being worked on now that can help as well on any of the proteins, the veggies, the starches. So whatever the culinary team needs, you can do. And I think Andrey hit on another key point as well. You can have the back of the house preparing. You could be, for example, getting all the bacon cooked in the morning to get ready for the bacon cheeseburgers, or perhaps you're cooking all the chicken. You've got it all done. Then you have one person on that action station out in front of the guests, and you're cooking the chicken fajitas, or you're cooking the shrimp for a Caesar salad. So you can get the proteins cooked in the morning with the combi ovens, bring it out to the action station, and entertain the guests. And as Connie said, it's all about meal preparation becoming more theatrical. And that's what the guests are going to expect, especially as they look at the facilities. Which ones intrigue me? Where do I want to stay? And then the word of mouth is going to be key as well. The culinary aspect is going to be probably the number one factor in these senior living sites.
Let's stay with the culinary aspect. Scott mentioned meal preparation there, Connie. Can you see any opportunity from ventless technology to make it easier to cut food waste in senior living projects specifically?
It's such an interesting point. Yes, I think anytime you're able to go from bulk production to cooking menus in more of a batch or a menu to order, you're going to be able to reduce your production waste. The other thing I think is when you're able to do more a la minute production, you're also going to reduce the food waste from things that were held and are just past their prime that you've got to dump because they no longer meet your quality standards. And not so much of an impact on food costs per se, but I think plate waste is another consideration. If you're able to cook what the customer wants in front of them and customize it according to their needs, they're not going to leave part of their meal on a plate because they didn't like it. And that's good for the planet.
Absolutely. Andrey, let's look at let's sort of address the elephant in the room, which is obviously COVID-19 and its impact on the sector. Post-COVID, do you think it's likely, it will require the likely termination of buffets and line assortments? Are action stations likely alternatives for the projects you work on specifically?
Yes, in fact, that's a long-standing battle that we always fought in making sure there's no buffets and salad bars. And sometimes we lost. And guess what? And now we're being asked by those clients to relook at it, right? And we are redesigning some of those projects where we lost that battle. So, and we are retrofitting them and putting like a more or less like a made to order station in the center. So now maybe we still have a salad bar, but it's more of a salad bar made to order with induction next to it. So now we can grill our proteins and toppings and things like that. And guess what? It provides a better, higher level quality experience, and maybe I can even charge a little extra for that salad and reducing waste and cross-contamination. So,
Connie, many senior living sites include a set meal plan, but you mentioned earlier catering to different demographics from boomers through to millennials. So are grandkids and extended family members potential sources of revenue as well? Is that good for additional sales? How does that help with guest morale, spirit, that kind of thing?
Oh my goodness, that is huge. I mean, we all know that socializing with people around food is huge for connections. So yeah, absolutely. If your senior living facility has a great menu, a great number of food options, the likelihood that you're going to have grandkids and family members come to visit and have a meal is going to impact the revenue. And even beyond that, there are senior living facilities that have restaurants that they've opened up to the surrounding community. Instead of the senior living being a self-contained community, it's now embraced by the surrounding and part of that local community, which I think is huge. And the other thing I think about is not just people from the outside, but the neighbors that live in that community with you. If you've got a coffee bar where you can get a bite to eat, if you've got a bar that does small plates, you're probably going to do more socializing and spend more of your discretionary meal plan on that venue.
Scott, are you seeing more of the contract food service giants, the Sodexos of the world, moving into senior living locations as kitchen and dining room operators now?
We're definitely seeing more of the Sodexos, the large giants, the food service operators going into it. And it's a matter of numbers. They see the aging demographics of the U.S. and the projections from the U.S. Census in the next 10 years, it's going to be 70 to 75 million Americans over 65. So that pool is growing. That's not going to slow down. And I think for the operators, labor is such a key issue. If you can outsource it, work out the program, or bring the experts in that know how to handle the culinary demands, the meal configurations, why not bring those, I'll call them logistics experts, right into your facility?
Makes sense. Thank you. Andrey, in your experience, how is Ventless innovation able to answer specific regulatory requirements that were previously relevant to things like tried and true cooking technology for senior living operators?
It's not easy to get all of the immediate approvals by the code reviewers and things like that. But I think what really would benefit, and maybe Scott's group and other manufacturers, If the industry had more white papers on the code education and approvals process where, okay, here's the main code, here's how it meets, how this piece of equipment, and kind of going through. I know Wells, for example, has a lot of great white papers like that, and we used it, and they're priceless. So having material like that, not only educating our clients and facilities and maintenance directors, but also then the code reviewers would go a long way.
Let's look at return on investment here. Scott, how much in terms of cost savings can a Ventless platform deliver, and why do you think it's worth the investment for a senior living operator?
When you're cooking and you're in front of the guest, not only are you having the meal preparation reinforced that it's fresh and it's safe, you're not putting it into a buffet, and after 15 minutes, 30 minutes, I think I'm going to have to throw it out. So number one, there's savings on food waste. And Andrey mentioned this as well. You can cook in the back of the house, get those proteins cooked in the morning so you're ready for that lunchtime race, and you can retherm it right there in the action station, sear it, heat it up, and make it look very attractive on the plate. So food waste is going to be a key cost reduction. The second area is labor. You can probably handle an action station with one person there. If all the mise en place, all the items are ready to go, you're not running back and forth or you're worrying about the back of the house. So I think there are labor savings as well, which is going to be key as the buffet lines are regulated out and terminated or dramatically restricted. So there's the solution, there's the alternative.
Connie, do you believe ultimately this technology is worth investing in for certain senior living clients that you work with?
I see it as an important tool in any toolbox, senior living or any. As a designer, when we work with clients, I think it's really important to, number one, for them to be very clear about how they intend to use it. What are the menu items they're looking to support? Is it realistic? Is it going to have enough throughput for them? I mean, to Scott's point, I agree. If you are able to behind the scenes, prepare for a meal period, set someone up, and be able to showcase your culinary talent out front and connect with your guests, that's huge. That is really, in this market, as well as others, it's really important. The other thing, though, is I think it's important for people to make very clear decisions about cost and benefit and the ROI on a piece of equipment. So they need to understand what the operating costs are the filter, how often does it have to be cleaned, when do filters have to get changed out. And one key thing to think about is when you're going into an existing program or building, the heat from the cooking equipment, the latent heat that comes off of cooking equipment, that gets captured by an exhaust hood. But in a ventless situation, it doesn't. So you also need to evaluate your HVAC and make sure that your building systems can handle that so that everybody's happy with the final outcome.
Andrey, do you agree with that? Do you think the technology is worth investing in?
Certainly. It depends what the application is, right? So we have to look at the number of customers we're feeding from that space and how do we offset it. Often there's mistakes made of, that upfront cost is big for that self-contained component system, but we're not crediting what if I had to put a hood, and that's $100,000. So offsetting those costs and then maybe even HVAC costs and things like that. So everything has to be balanced. But in our projects everywhere where, like Connie said, you have to look at every project has its own conditions and parameters. And as we as professionals have to know when to propose it. And when it does, it makes sense.
I'll stay with you there, Andrey, but I'll ask each of you in turn, if possible, please, to just sum up, where do you think ventless technology is going to go? How do you see ventless cooking innovation evolving in the future for senior living specifically? Andrey, if you could answer first, please.
I think it needs more engineering. It needs to be more sexy. It needs to be more appealing. It needs to be more designed, more European flair, right? Because if you're going to do ventless, most likely it's going to go front of the house and add those high touch experience points with the customer. So looking at the technology today, I feel it's very bulky, it's noisy. So Scott, here's a recommendation for you. Maybe the recirculating fan is remote. What if it goes in the ceiling or right behind the unit with the grill that puts the air back, right? So eliminating that noise, maybe taking that technology to the next level and maybe getting some more engineering into it.
I see it continuing, or I hope it continues to make advances. And I completely agree with what Andrey said. It does not make sense to hire skilled culinary folks and put them out front and try to create food theater when the equipment looks kind of back of the house. And I will grant you, it's a challenging proposition for manufacturers because you have to think about food safety, you have to think about the ventilation, you have to think about the cooking capability. In some cases, you have to think about breath protection. So they've got their work cut out for them, but I think there's a huge opportunity if they embrace it.
Scott, finally to you, huge potential here, huge opportunity, but where do you see the technology evolving?
Absolutely huge. And again, I'm just going to build on what Andrey and Connie said. The good news is the manufacturing community, I'm certain, is looking at new innovations and new ideas. But I can speak firsthand with Middleby and what we are doing, even down to the sneeze guards. How do you make it more attractive? How do you make it more appealing? And I agree, that sleeker European look, that's something underway right now. Because if an action station, and I shouldn't say if, when the action stations are placed in senior living, it's got to look like it belongs there, that it's not a sore thumb or a bulky item. So we are working on action stations that really fit that whole culinary deal. And as Connie said, when you get that culinary line cook or the actual chef right there, the equipment will deliver what they want on the meal, but it's got to add to meal preparation being theatrical. And that will come back to the designs and the new innovations that we're working on.
Definitely one to watch. Thank you very much, guys. That's been a really fascinating discussion, really elevated by your experience and insight there. So I'd like to thank you all for taking part. I'd like to thank the Middleby Corporation for supporting this, and thank you all for watching. Thank you very much.